I'm Elena Martinez, 26 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the invisible daughter in a family that only saw one shining star. When the invitation arrived for a family financial meeting at Grandmama Sophia's estate in California, my heart raced with both anticipation and dread. Despite my journalism degree and award-winning investigative work, my parents only had eyes for my sister Victoria. That weekend in Napa Valley would shatter everything I thought I knew about my place in the Martinez family legacy. Before I dive deeper into this story that changed my life forever, I'd love to know where you're reading from. Please like and share if you've ever felt overlooked in your own family. This journey of unexpected justice might surprise you. Growing up as a Martinez meant privilege wrapped in tradition. Our family estate in San Diego sprawled across 8 acres of manicured gardens, complete with a vineyard that my great-grandfather had planted and a main house that could have graced the pages of Architectural Digest. The Martinez media empire, built by my grandmother Sophia from a single Spanish-language newspaper, now owned television stations, digital platforms, and newspapers across the Southwest. From my earliest memories, the family hierarchy was crystal clear. Victoria, for years older than me, commanded attention like a magnet draws metal. When she delivered the valedictorian speech at her private school graduation, my parents threw a celebration that made the society pages of 3 newspapers. When I won the National High School Journalism Competition at 16, they missed the awards ceremony because Victoria had a minor panic attack about her college applications. "That's wonderful, Mija," my mother Carmen would say without looking up from her charity board documents when I brought home my latest article published in the school paper. "But could you keep it down? Victoria is studying for her business presentations." My father Roberto, CEO of Martinez Media Group, had groomed Victoria for leadership from the moment she could form complete sentences. My future successor, he'd call her proudly as she practiced giving mock board presentations in his office. I would sit in the corner, quietly researching stories on my laptop, already showing the investigative instincts that would define my career. But no one noticed except Grandmama Sophia. Sophia Martinez wasn't like her son Roberto. She'd built her media empire from absolutely nothing, starting as a seamstress who saved every penny to buy a small printing press. Her first newspaper, La Voz del Pueblo, gave voice to the Spanish-speaking community when no one else would listen. Perhaps that's why she noticed my passion for uncovering truth, my dedication to stories that mattered, my quiet determination to shine light in dark corners. "You have the heart of a true journalist, mi nieta," she told me once, examining an exposé I'd written about corruption in our local school district. "Real journalism isn't about fame or money. It's about speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves." Those moments with Grandmama Sophia sustained me through a childhood of constant comparison to Victoria. Her visits were rare as she maintained homes across California and Mexico, but each one reminded me that someone in this family understood my dreams. By high school, I'd stopped seeking my parents' approval. I channeled my energy into journalism, working for the school paper, interning at local news stations, and eventually getting published in regional magazines. My graduation speech was attended only by Grandmama Sophia, who flew in specially, while my parents arrived 30 minutes late because Victoria's sorority had an emergency meeting. College at Columbia Journalism School brought freedom and validation. My investigative pieces on campus sexual assault policies won national recognition. My professors praised my fearless approach to uncovering institutional corruption. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen for who I was, not compared to who I wasn't. Meanwhile, Victoria attended business school at Stanford, preparing to join our father at Martinez Media. After graduation, I turned down my father's lukewarm offer to find something for me at the company. Instead, I joined the San Francisco Chronicle as an investigative reporter, specializing in exposing corporate malfeasance and political corruption. My starting salary was half what Victoria received when she joined the family business, but every penny was earned through my own merit. The past 3 years had been professionally fulfilling but personally challenging. My major investigation into pharmaceutical price fixing had led to congressional hearings and industry reform, but it had also made me enemies in powerful places. My relationship with David, a fellow journalist, ended when he accepted a job with a media conglomerate whose corruption I'd previously exposed. He called it a conflict of interest. I called it selling out. You could always come home to the family business, my father suggested during one of our rare phone calls after hearing about my latest professional setback. The conversation lasted 2 minutes before he excused himself to take an important call from Victoria. I was still rebuilding my personal life when the call came from Marcus Chen, Grandmama Sophia's longtime attorney and family friend. Your grandmother requests your presence this weekend at Vista del Sol, he said in his formal tone. It concerns family financial planning. Everyone will be there. The last family gathering had been Christmas, a tense affair where Victoria monopolized conversation with tales of her corporate achievements while my parents hung on her every word. I'd left early, claiming a deadline that didn't actually exist. But refusing Grandmama Sophia wasn't an option. She'd recently turned 82, and though she rarely discussed health matters, family whispers suggested she'd been consulting specialists in Los Angeles. The drive north to Napa Valley that Friday afternoon gave me too much time to think. Would this weekend bring more of the same family dynamics, or was change finally coming? As the gates of Vista del Sol came into view, I took a deep breath and prepared for whatever awaited. The gravel crunched beneath my rental car tires as I pulled up the winding driveway to Vista del Sol. The sprawling Spanish colonial mansion, with its red tile roof and arched walkways, had always intimidated me despite the warm memories I'd formed here with Grandmama Sophia during summer visits. Miguel, the estate manager who'd worked for our family for 30 years, appeared before I'd even turned off the engine. Señorita Elena, he said warmly, opening my door with a genuine smile. Qué bueno verte. Your grandmother has been waiting for you. Gracias, Miguel. How is she doing? I asked, grabbing my overnight bag from the passenger seat. A brief shadow crossed his weathered face. She has good days and difficult ones. Today, she seems determined. I nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Whatever this gathering was about, Grandmama's health was likely a driving factor. The grand foyer was already buzzing with family members. Tia Isabella, my father's sister, embraced me warmly, while Tio Carlos, my mother's brother, raised his glass of wine in greeting from across the room. Various cousins I hadn't seen in years clustered in small conversational groups, the air thick with speculation about why we'd all been summoned. Well, look who finally graced us with her presence, came Victoria's voice from the curved staircase. She descended with practiced elegance, every inch the corporate princess in her designer pantsuit and perfectly styled hair. At 30, she had our mother's classical beauty combined with our father's calculating eyes. Hello, Victoria, I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. Good to see you too. Is it though? She air-kissed my cheek. I love the casual journalist look you've got going. So authentic. I resisted the urge to smooth my simple blazer and dark jeans, refusing to let her make me feel inadequate within minutes of arrival. Before I could respond, my parents emerged from the library, their expressions shifting from animated conversation to polite acknowledgement when they spotted me. Elena, you made it, my mother said as though my attendance had been uncertain. She kissed the air near my cheek, careful not to disturb her immaculate makeup. My father gave my shoulder an awkward pat. Traffic wasn't too bad coming up from the city, I hope? Fine, Dad, thanks. But his attention was already wandering. Victoria, there you are. Marcus was asking about those market analysis reports you prepared. Just like that, I was forgotten again as they swept Victoria back toward the library, peppering her with questions about advertising revenues and market expansion. Some things never changed. Don't let them get under your skin, Mija. The familiar voice came from behind me. I turned to find Grandmama Sophia approaching in her wheelchair, a beautiful woven shawl across her shoulders despite the warm evening. Her once tall frame had diminished with age, but her dark eyes remained as sharp and observant as ever. Abuela. I knelt beside her chair, embracing her carefully. She felt more fragile than at Christmas, but her grip when she squeezed my hand remained surprisingly strong. Mi nieta preciosa, she said softly. The only one who still hugs me like I'm her grandmother instead of a business obligation. I've never been much for hovering awkwardly, I replied, which made her laugh. The same rich, warm sound I remembered from childhood. That's why you're my favorite, though don't tell the others. She winked conspiratorially, then grew more serious. There's much to discuss this weekend, Elena. But first, dinner. I requested your favorite. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a magnificent space featuring hand-painted murals depicting the history of Spanish California. Tonight, 20 places were set along the mahogany table that had been in our family for 4 generations. I found myself seated between Cousin Miguel Jr., who spent most of dinner discussing his tech startup, and Tia Isabella, who at least asked genuine questions about my work. Across from me, my parents flanked Victoria in what had become their traditional formation, a united front showcasing the family's chosen successor. Martinez Media just closed the acquisition of 3 radio stations in Phoenix, my father announced proudly. Victoria led the negotiations. Brilliant work, absolutely brilliant. It was nothing special, Victoria demurred with practiced modesty. Just applied the strategies you taught me, Papa. Nothing special? My mother touched her pearl necklace dramatically. She saved us $12 million on the deal. The board was stunned. The conversation continued in this vein throughout the first 3 courses, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to highlight Victoria's business acumen and our parents' pride. Occasionally, someone would remember my existence and toss a polite question my way. "And how's your little newspaper work going, Elena?" my mother asked as the main course was served. "I'm an investigative journalist, Mama," I corrected gently. "And actually, my series on environmental cover-ups by chemical companies just won the Polk Award." "How nice," she replied vaguely before immediately turning back to Victoria. "Tell everyone about the streaming platform acquisition, darling." I caught Grandmama Sophia watching this exchange, her expression unreadable. When our eyes met, she gave me a subtle nod that somehow conveyed both apology and patience. After dinner, most of the family retired to the salon for drinks and dessert. I excused myself for a walk in the gardens, needing fresh air and solitude to prepare for whatever tomorrow would bring. As I passed the library, I heard voices from within. The door stood slightly ajar, and my parents' and Victoria's voices carried clearly. Marcus confirmed it. My father was saying, "Mama has restructured her estate plan. The announcement tomorrow will be significant." "Did she give you any details?" Victoria asked. "Not specifics, but she implied we'd be very pleased with the arrangements. Something about rewarding true business leadership." My mother's voice chimed in. "It's only right. Victoria has been groomed for this role her entire life. The inheritance should reflect her contributions." "What about Elena?" Victoria asked, surprising me. My father scoffed. "What about her? She chose her path. Can't expect the same consideration when she's contributed nothing to the family legacy." "Roberto," my mother cautioned, "she is still your daughter, and I've supported her accordingly. College, living expenses when she needed them. But this is different. This is about the future of everything we've built." "Of course, Papa," Victoria soothed. "I just wanted to make sure we're prepared for any awkwardness tomorrow." "Leave that to me," he replied confidently. "Now, about the expansion into the Dallas market." I backed away silently, my chest tight with familiar pain. Nothing had changed. Nothing would ever change. In my family's eyes, I would always be the daughter who'd chosen the wrong path, who'd valued ideals over inheritance. I retreated to my room, suddenly exhausted by the prospect of facing tomorrow's announcement and the confirmation of what I'd always known. But as I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about Grandmama Sophia's words from years past. Real power isn't inherited, Mija. It's earned by those brave enough to use it for good. Saturday morning dawned crystal clear, the California sun casting golden light across the vineyard that stretched toward the hills. I'd slept poorly, my dreams troubled by fragments of overheard conversations and childhood memories of always being second best. After a run through the vineyard rows, I showered and dressed carefully in a navy dress that projected quiet confidence I didn't entirely feel. Breakfast was a subdued affair, family members drifting in and out of the sunroom where a buffet had been arranged. Everyone seemed aware that the real purpose of our gathering would soon be addressed. Victoria held court at the center table, looking fresh despite mentioning the late-night strategy session she'd had with our father. My mother fluttered around her, ensuring her coffee cup remained filled while pointedly ignoring everyone else's empty ones. At precisely 10 a.m., Miguel appeared in the doorway. "Senora Martinez requests everyone's presence in the library in 15 minutes, he announced formally. The room immediately buzzed with speculative whispers. I finished my coffee in silence, steeling myself for what would likely be another exercise in family disappointment. The library was Grandmama Sophia's domain, a two-story space lined with books in Spanish, English, and Portuguese, dominated by an enormous desk carved from a single piece of California redwood. Today, the furniture had been rearranged to create a semicircle of chairs facing the desk, behind which sat Marcus Chun, organizing documents with meticulous precision. Grandmama Sophia was already positioned at the head of the arrangement in her wheelchair, looking more formal than I'd seen her in years. She wore a beautiful black dress with her late husband's watch, her silver hair pinned in an elegant chignon. She nodded slightly as I entered, her expression giving nothing away. Once everyone was seated, Marcus cleared his throat. "Thank you all for gathering at Mrs. Martinez's request. Before we begin the formal proceedings regarding her estate planning, she has asked that the family be given time for any personal financial announcements." This deviation from expected protocol caused confused glances among the relatives. My father, however, straightened in his chair and exchanged a knowing look with my mother. "Actually," my father said, rising to his feet, "Carmen and I would like to take this opportunity to address something we've been planning for some time." He moved to stand beside Grandmama Sophia's chair, though his focus remained on the assembled family rather than his mother. As you all know, Martinez Media has flourished under the legacy established by my mother and continued through my leadership. With an eye toward the future, and in recognition of the next generation's contributions, Carmen and I have decided to make a significant distribution from our personal assets now, rather than waiting for traditional inheritance timelines. Murmurs rippled through the room. Early inheritance distributions weren't unheard of in wealthy families, but they typically coincided with major life events or business transitions. My father produced a leather portfolio from his briefcase. "We've been blessed with 2 daughters, both of whom we're immensely proud of." His gaze rested briefly on me before shifting to Victoria, where it lingered with unmistakable preference. "However, one has demonstrated exceptional dedication to our family's mission. One has sacrificed personal pursuits to ensure Martinez Media continues to thrive for generations. One has proven herself not just as a daughter, but as a true guardian of everything we've worked to build." The direction of his speech was painfully clear, but I maintained my composure, hands folded tightly in my lap. "Therefore, Carmen and I are allocating $8 million from our personal holdings to Victoria, effective immediately." My mother stepped forward with a silver envelope, which my father presented to Victoria with ceremonial gravity. This will allow her greater flexibility in her strategic vision for the company and recognize her unparalleled commitment to our family's success. Victoria accepted the envelope with practiced humility. "Thank you, Papa Mama. I'm honored by your trust and will continue to uphold our family's standards of excellence." Scattered applause broke out among some relatives, while others looked uncomfortable, glancing between Victoria's triumphant smile and my carefully neutral expression. "Elena," my father turned to me as an apparent afterthought. "While your chosen career path hasn't aligned with family business interests, we do wish you well. Perhaps this will motivate you to reconsider your priorities and achieve the kind of success your sister has demonstrated." The words hit like a physical blow. Not just the obvious favoritism, which I'd long accepted, but the implication that my Polk award-winning journalism, my exposés that had led to real reform, my work giving voice to the voiceless, none of it mattered because it didn't generate profit for Martinez Media. Heat crept up my neck as conversation resumed around me. Victoria was already discussing how she might leverage her windfall for maximum company benefit, while my mother nodded encouragingly, shooting occasional guilty glances my way. I rose quietly, intending to slip out unnoticed. I needed air, space to process yet another confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. But as I reached the door, a commotion behind me made everyone turn. Grandmama Sophia had raised her hand. The simple gesture commanded immediate silence despite her physical frailty. With visible effort, she gripped the arms of her wheelchair and slowly, deliberately, pushed herself to standing. "Mama, please," my father started forward. "There's no need to strain yourself." Grandmama Sophia waved him off with surprising firmness. "I can stand on my own 2 feet, Roberto. Something I'm not sure you've ever truly learned to do." The shocking rebuke froze my father mid-step. The room fell into stunned silence as my grandmother steadied herself, one hand resting on her desk for support. "I've sat here today and watched a display that confirms my worst fears about what's become of this family," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "About what's become of the values I thought I'd instilled in my son." Her gaze swept the room, lingering particularly on my parents and Victoria before finding me still paused by the door. "Elena, please come back and take a seat. What I have to say concerns you most of all." The walk back to my seat felt endless. Every eye in the room followed my progress as I moved carefully across the Persian rug, conscious of the dramatic shift in atmosphere. I settled into a chair directly across from my grandmother, who remained standing despite visible effort. "Sophia, perhaps you should sit," Marcus suggested gently. "We can take a brief recess." "I'll stand for this," my grandmother replied firmly. Some moments in life demand that a person stand on their own feet, no matter the cost. She straightened her shoulders, suddenly looking much more like the commanding figure from my childhood memories than the frilier version who had greeted me yesterday. "I founded La Voz del Pueblo 60 years ago with $200 and a belief that truth was more valuable than profit," she began. "When I brought Roberto into the business, I thought I'd successfully passed on not just my business knowledge, but my principles." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Mama, this isn't the time for a business history lesson." Silence. The single word, not shouted, but delivered with unmistakable authority, cut through the room. My father actually flinched. "I've watched and waited, Roberto. For years I've observed how you've run both the business and this family. I kept hoping you'd remember what truly matters. Today has proven beyond doubt that you've forgotten entirely." Grandmama Sophia turned her attention to me, her expression softening slightly. "Elena, from the time you were small, researching stories on that little laptop in my office, I've seen something in you that reminded me of myself. Not ambition for ambition's sake, but a desire to uncover truth, to speak for those who have no voice." A lump formed in my throat as she continued. "I've followed your career quietly. Your investigation into the pharmaceutical pricing conspiracy. Your exposé of the housing discrimination in Oakland. The pro bono work you've done for immigrant families facing deportation. All accomplished without family connections or the Martinez name opening doors." I blinked rapidly, shocked that she knew these details. Some of those stories had been published under different bylines for safety reasons. Meanwhile, she turned toward Victoria, who immediately sat straighter. "I've also observed how others conduct themselves when they think no one of consequence is watching." My sister's confident smile faltered slightly. "The Phoenix Radio acquisition you're so proud of. Did you tell your father how you obtained their confidential financial information? Or how you threatened their operations manager with exposure of his gambling debts unless he provided internal documents?" Victoria's face drained of color. "Abuela, business negotiations are complex. Sometimes aggressive tactics are necessary." Grandmama Sophia cut her off sharply. "Illegal wiretapping is never necessary. Nor is taking credit for others' work, as you did with the streaming platform strategy that was actually developed by your team member Sarah, whom you later had transferred when she questioned your methods." My parents looked stunned. My father started to object, but Grandmama silenced him with a raised hand. "I've had investigators documenting everything for years. Not just business practices, but character. The true measure of a legacy isn't profit margins, Roberto. It's the impact we have on others, the integrity with which we conduct ourselves when no one is watching. My grandmother reached inside her dress and withdrew an envelope, not the theatrical presentation my father had orchestrated earlier, but a simple white envelope with my name written in her distinctive handwriting. "Elena, please." On unsteady legs, I rose and accepted the envelope. It felt substantial in my hands, weighty with possibility. "Open it," she instructed gently. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and removed the contents. A single check, made out to me for $40 million. The room erupted in gasps and shouts. I stared at the check, certain I was misreading the numbers. "This can't be real." "It's very real," Grandmama confirmed, "and it's only the beginning." "You can't do this." My mother's voice sliced through the chaos, high and panicked. She leapt to her feet, face contorted with outrage. "You can't just bypass your own son to give everything to her." "I can and I am, Carmen," she replied calmly. "My money, my choice." "This is about punishing me, isn't it?" my father demanded, his composure cracking. "Because I modernized the business instead of keeping it exactly as you build it?" "This has nothing to do with business modernization, Roberto. This is about character. About recognizing that the true Martinez spirit lives on in Elena, not in those who simply bear the Martinez name while betraying its values." Victoria had recovered enough to join the offensive. "Abuela, you're clearly not thinking straight. Elena has no business experience. She writes newspaper articles for a living. How could she possibly handle this level of responsibility?" "With more grace and wisdom than you've demonstrated," my grandmother replied. "Marcus, please continue with the formal announcements." The attorney cleared his throat. "As Mrs. Martinez has indicated, this initial distribution is merely preliminary. The full estate plan includes the establishment of the Martinez Legacy Trust, with primary controlling interest in all family business entities and properties. Miss Elena Martinez is named as sole trustee." The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about money, it was about control of everything the family had built over 3 generations. "You're destroying everything we've worked for," my father shouted, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "On the contrary," Grandmama replied, "I'm saving it from those who never understood its true value." She turned to me again, her eyes both gentle and resolute. "Elena, I know this is overwhelming. You can decline if you wish. The contingency plan would direct everything to a journalism foundation dedicated to protecting press freedom worldwide." The room fell silent again, all eyes upon me as I stood there still clutching the check that represented more money than I'd ever imagined possessing. "Why me?" I asked softly, the only question that truly mattered in that moment. "Because you understand that power is a responsibility, not a privilege," she answered. "Because you've demonstrated courage without expectation of reward. Because when you write a story, you consider not just how it reads, but how it serves those who need truth most." She paused, then added simply, "Because you're the best of us, Elena. The one who remembered what we're supposed to stand for." For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen by my family. Not as the disappointment, the one who'd chosen the wrong path, but as someone worthy of respect. And it had come from the person whose opinion had always mattered most. "I accept," I said quietly, my voice growing stronger as I repeated, "I accept the responsibility." My mother collapsed dramatically into her chair while my father stormed toward the door, pausing only to glare at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Victoria remained frozen, her carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around her. Grandmama Sofia finally allowed herself to be helped back into her wheelchair, the effort of standing having clearly drained her. But her eyes remained clear and satisfied as Marcus continued outlining the details of what would become my new reality. The library door slammed violently behind my father, the sound reverberating through the suddenly silent room. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupted. "This is insane," my mother declared, her voice brittle as she rose from her chair. "Sophia, You cannot possibly believe this is appropriate. Roberto has dedicated his life to this family, to this business. To appearances, Carmen. Grandmama corrected firmly. There's a difference. Victoria remained unnaturally still, her practiced poise abandoned as she stared at me with naked hostility. You planned this, she finally hissed. All these years pretending you didn't care about the family business, acting so noble with your little newspaper stories while secretly manipulating Abuela. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed despite the tension. Victoria, I'm as shocked as you are. Liar. She stood abruptly, sending her chair toppling backward. You've always been jealous of me, always playing the victim while plotting behind my back. Marcus intervened with practiced diplomatic skill. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow everyone to process this information. Mrs. Martinez has had considerable time to consider these decisions, but I understand they come as a surprise to the family. Tia Isabella approached me as others began filtering out, her expression a mixture of concern and amusement. Well, that certainly livened up what I expected would be a dreadfully boring meeting. She squeezed my arm gently. For what it's worth, Sophia got this right. You've always had substance over show. Tio Carlos merely raised his coffee cup in a subtle toast from across the room before following the others out, leaving me alone with Grandmama Sophia and Marcus. They'll try to challenge this, I said once the door closed behind the last relative. They can try, Marcus replied mildly. Every document is impeccable. Medical evaluations confirming your grandmother's sound mind were conducted by 3 independent specialists. The trust structure has been reviewed by the top legal minds in estate planning. Unless you choose to decline, this is ironclad. Grandmama gestured for me to sit beside her. I should have prepared you better, but I needed their genuine reactions. Needed you to see them clearly for who they are when the stakes are high. I've always seen them clearly, I said softly. I just stopped expecting anything different years ago. She patted my hand. There's more you should understand before they regroup and return with their arguments. The check is just the beginning, a personal gift to give you immediate independence. The full trust includes controlling interest in Martinez Media Group, Vista del Sol, the properties in Mexico and Spain, and all investment portfolios. The scale was difficult to comprehend. Abuela, I'm a journalist, not a media executive. I don't know how to run a communications empire. You don't need to personally manage daily operations. That's what qualified executives are for. What the company needs is someone with vision and integrity at the helm. The technical aspects can be learned or delegated. Marcus added, the trust includes provisions for a transition period with a board of advisors I've personally vetted. You won't be without guidance. There's one more element, Grandmama continued. I've allocated substantial funding for the Martinez Foundation for Investigative Journalism. The mission statement aligns with the work you've already been doing, exposing corruption, giving voice to the voiceless, protecting democratic institutions through fearless reporting. My eyes widened. This aligned so perfectly with my deepest professional ambitions that it momentarily overshadowed the inheritance itself. How did you know? I've barely discussed these ideas with anyone. A small smile played at her lips. I pay attention, Elena. Always have. Your graduate thesis on the role of investigative journalism in social justice. The pro bono work you've done despite your newspaper's disapproval. The articles you've published under the byline E.M. Santos about media consolidation threatening press freedom. You knew about those? I'd used the pseudonym thinking no one had connected them to me. Little escapes me, especially when it concerns people I care about. Her expression grew more serious. Which is why I also know exactly what Roberto and Victoria have been doing at the company. The ethics violations, the intimidation tactics, the gradual erosion of everything I built it to stand for. The door burst open, interrupting our conversation as Victoria strode back in, our mother trailing behind her. Victoria had clearly been crying but had reapplied her makeup and straightened her shoulders, back in control mode. I want to speak to Abuela alone, she announced, then glared at me. Without you present. Before I could respond, Grandmama Sophia spoke. Anything you wish to say can be said in front of Elena. She's trustee now. Fine. Victoria's voice was ice. I want to know what lies she's been telling you about me. What distortions she's fed you to poison you against your actual heir. Elena has never spoken a negative word about you to me, my grandmother replied calmly. She didn't need to. Your actions speak for themselves. What actions? Building the company to record profits? Securing international partnerships? Working 90-hour weeks while she plays with newspaper deadlines? Bribing sources for confidential information on the housing discrimination story, Grandmama countered. Burying harassment complaints against executives who supported your advancement. Manipulating board members with selectively edited recordings. Shall I continue? The color drained from Victoria's face. That's not. How did you? Did you really think I wouldn't keep an eye on my own company? That I wouldn't have loyal people still reporting to me? My mother stepped forward, her strategy shifting to appeal rather than demand. Sophia, we're family. Whatever concerns you have can be addressed. But this public humiliation of Roberto and Victoria is unconscionable after everything they've sacrificed. Carmen, the only sacrifice I've witnessed is of principles for profit, she sighed, suddenly looking tired. I don't expect you to understand now. Perhaps you never will. But my decision stands. She'll destroy everything, Victoria spat, pointing at me. She knows nothing about business. She writes stories about corruption for a living. How could she possibly handle this level of responsibility? She knows everything about integrity, which is the foundation business should be built upon, my grandmother replied. Now I'm tired. This discussion is over. As if on cue, Miguel appeared at the door. Senora Martinez needs to rest now. Doctor's orders. My mother and sister had no choice but to retreat, though Victoria paused at the door to deliver a final barb. Enjoy your victory today. It won't last. After they left, I helped Grandmama back to her private suite where her nurse was waiting. As I turned to leave her to rest, she caught my hand. They'll try to make you doubt yourself, she said quietly. Don't let them. I didn't make this decision lightly or recently. I've watched you for years, seen your character tested in ways they've never faced. You're ready for this, even if you don't believe it yet. I squeezed her hand gently. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Not believing, she smiled tiredly.
Knowing.
Now go. You have a lot to think about, and they'll be regrouping for their next approach. Stand firm, Elena. The hardest part of leadership is maintaining your course when everyone is demanding you change direction. As I left her room, I felt a strange new sense of confidence beneath the lingering shock. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family disappointment. I was the Martinez heir, chosen not by birth order or parental preference, but on merit. I retreated to the vineyard, one of my favorite spots on the property, to process everything that had happened. The check remained in my pocket, still surreal in its implications. Financial independence. Freedom from ever having to worry about newspaper layoffs or corporate censorship again. The ability to create the kind of investigative journalism platform I'd only dreamed about. But with it came complications I hadn't anticipated. Family relationships, already strained, would likely be permanently damaged. Leadership responsibilities I'd never sought would demand attention. A legacy I'd long ago accepted wasn't mine to continue would now fall squarely on my shoulders. As the sun began to set over the valley, casting golden light across the grapevines, I heard footsteps on the path behind me. Turning, I found Tia Isabella approaching with 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might need this, she said, offering me one. It's been quite a day. I accepted gratefully. That's putting it mildly. She settled beside me on a stone bench overlooking the valley. You know they're up there plotting right now. Roberto's called the family attorney. Victoria's going through old emails looking for anything she can use against you. Carmen's already called 3 board members. How do you know all this? She smiled cryptically. I've always found it advantageous to be underestimated in this family. People say remarkable things when they think you're just ditzy Tia Isabella who never had a head for business. I laughed despite myself. Have you been spying for Abuela all these years? Let's just say Sophia and I have always had an understanding. We both value substance over show. She sipped her wine. They'll come at you with everything there. Try this response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continued to nudge Claude along. Continue. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. They'll come at you with everything they have, Elena. Roberto will challenge the trust legally. Victoria will try to turn the board against you, and Carmen will work the family network to isolate you socially. Are you prepared for that level of warfare? The question hung in the evening air as I considered my response. I've spent my career taking on pharmaceutical companies and corrupt politicians. I think I can handle my own family. Good. Isabella smiled with genuine warmth. Because you're going to need that steel spine in the weeks ahead. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the valley. In the distance, lights flickered on in the main house where my family was undoubtedly strategizing their response. For the first time, I wasn't dreading the confrontation. Instead, I found myself looking forward to proving I was worthy of Grandmama Sophia's faith. 3 months later, the boardroom at Martinez Media Group had never felt more like a battlefield. I sat at the head of the polished conference table, the same seat my father had occupied for 20 years, facing 15 board members whose expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile. The quarterly reports show improvement across all metrics, I announced, distributing copies of the analysis Marcus and I had prepared. Advertising revenue is up 12%. Digital subscriptions have increased by 35%, and most importantly, our investigative reporting has won 3 major journalism awards this quarter alone. Board member Patricia Hernandez, one of my father's longtime allies, barely glanced at the documents. Numbers can be manipulated, Elena. What concerns us is the direction you're taking this company. Investigative journalism is expensive and often alienates advertisers. It also builds credibility and distinguishes us from clickbait competitors, I replied calmly. The pharmaceutical expose alone brought in $2 million in new subscriptions. And lost us the Meridian Pharma advertising contract worth $8 million annually, interjected David Kim, another old guard member. A contract that required us to suppress negative coverage of their products, I countered. I'd rather lose compromised revenue than our integrity. The room erupted in murmured conversations. I'd expected this resistance. My father had spent years cultivating board members who prioritized profit over principles. But I'd also spent the past 3 months building relationships with the journalists and mid-level executives who understood the company's true potential. Sarah Martinez-Chin, the employee Victoria had tried to transfer, had become my most valuable ally after I promoted her to Senior Vice President of Digital Strategy. Her streaming platform innovations were already showing remarkable results. If I may, Sarah stood from her position along the wall, the metrics Elena presented don't tell the full story. Since implementing her editorial standards, our journalist retention rate has improved by 60%. We're attracting top talent from competitors specifically because of our commitment to authentic reporting. Patricia waved dismissively. Idealism doesn't pay overhead costs. Neither does having no credibility with readers, I replied. Which is where we were heading under the previous leadership's approach. The door opened, interrupting the heated discussion. My father entered with Victoria close behind, both dressed as if they were still running the company rather than excluded from it entirely. Roberto, I said evenly, this is a closed board meeting. You're not. I'm still a shareholder, he interrupted, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table from me. And I have concerns about the direction of my mother's company under inexperienced leadership. Victoria positioned herself strategically near the board members who'd been most vocal in their criticism. We've received troubling reports about recent decisions that could jeopardize everything this company has built. I'd been anticipating this moment for weeks. Such as turning down the Henderson Industries merger, my father announced dramatically. A deal worth $200 million that you rejected without board consultation. Murmurs of concern rippled around the table. I let them build before responding. A merger that would have required us to lay off 300 employees and abandon our investigative reporting division entirely. I had full authority to reject it under the trust provisions. Authority you've abused repeatedly, Victoria accused. Installing unqualified personnel in senior positions, spending trust funds on a journalism foundation that benefits only your personal agenda, alienating profitable partnerships. Everything I've done has been documented and approved by the Trust Oversight Committee, I interrupted firmly. Unlike certain previous management decisions that are currently under federal investigation. The room fell silent. Victoria's face drained of color while my father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What investigation? Patricia demanded. Marcus Chun, who'd been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward with a briefcase. The SEC has opened an inquiry into several transactions during the previous administration. Wiretapping allegations, bid rigging, and potential securities violations. Mrs. Martinez provided documentation supporting these investigations before her passing. The words hit the room like a physical blow. My grandmother had died peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks earlier, but apparently not before ensuring her final wishes were secured legally. That's impossible, my father stammered. We followed all regulatory requirements. Perhaps you should have followed ethical requirements as well, I replied quietly. Victoria recovered first, her political instincts kicking in. Even if there are historical irregularities, that doesn't justify Elena's radical restructuring of a profitable enterprise. Profitable through compromised reporting and advertiser manipulation, I countered. We're building something better. Something Grandmama Sophia would be proud of. Sophia is gone, my father said harshly. And her sentimental view of this business died with her. This company needs pragmatic leadership, not journalistic fantasies. The callous dismissal of his own mother finally triggered something in me I'd kept carefully controlled. I stood, placing both hands flat on the conference table, and for the first time since inheriting this responsibility, I let my anger show. Grandmama Sophia built this company from nothing because she believed truth and integrity mattered more than profit margins. She chose me not despite my journalistic principles, but because of them. And every board member in this room is here because they've benefited from her vision, not yours. I turned to address the board directly. You have a choice to make today. Support the direction that's already showing positive results and aligns with our founding principles, or continue supporting leadership that's currently under federal investigation for ethics violations. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Patricia finally spoke. We'll need time to review these new revelations. Take all the time you need, I replied. But understand that my authority as trustee is absolute. This company will continue moving forward with, or without your support. As board members filed out, exchanging worried whispers, Victoria approached my end of the table. You think you've won, but this isn't over. There are still legal challenges pending. Victoria, I said quietly, I never wanted to be your enemy. I just wanted to be respected as your sister. But if you insist on treating this as warfare, you should know I've been preparing for battle my entire career. She left without another word, my father following silently behind her. I remained in the boardroom alone, feeling the weight of leadership but also, for the first time, truly confident in my ability to carry it. 6 months later, the Martinez Foundation for Investigative Journalism occupied an entire floor of a renovated warehouse in San Francisco's Mission District. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city where I'd started my career, but now I was funding the next generation of journalists brave enough to ask difficult questions. The application from the Myanmar Democracy Reporting Project looks promising, said James Rivera, the Foundation's executive director, as we reviewed grant proposals in my office. Independent verification of military atrocities could provide crucial evidence for international courts. Approve it, I decided immediately, and see if we can provide additional security funding. Journalists covering human rights violations face real physical danger. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Board voted unanimously to approve the digital expansion plan. Even Patricia voted yes. Smiley face. I smiled at the news. The past 6 months had seen a complete transformation in board dynamics as ethics investigations led to my father and Victoria's complete removal from company influence. 3 board members had resigned rather than face association with the scandal, replaced by journalists and media ethics experts who understood our mission. "There's someone here to see you," my assistant announced from the doorway. "Says she's family, but isn't on your appointment schedule." Curious, I told her to send them in. To my surprise, Tia Isabella appeared, looking elegant as always, but with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Isabella." I rose to embrace her. "What brings you to San Francisco?" "Checking on my favorite niece," she replied, though something in her tone suggested a more serious purpose. "Do you have time for lunch? There are some things we should discuss." An hour later, we were seated at a quiet corner table in North Beach, Isabella having insisted on a restaurant where we could speak privately. "Roberto and Victoria are moving to Mexico," she said without preamble once our wine arrived. I blinked in surprise. "Permanently?" "The SEC investigation has made staying in the United States uncomfortable for them. Roberto's accepted a position with a media company in Mexico City. Victoria's starting over in their marketing division." "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. Isabella sipped her wine thoughtfully. "Relieved, honestly. They'd become so consumed with resentment that every family gathering was unbearable. Perhaps distance will give them perspective." "And Mama?" "Carmen is staying in San Diego for now, though she's barely speaking to anyone. She blames you for destroying the family." Isabella paused. "I want you to know that's not how everyone sees it." "How do you see it?" "I see someone who honored Sophia's legacy by refusing to compromise it for convenience. I see someone who's built something meaningful rather than just profitable." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I see someone who's finally found where she belongs." The words meant more to me than I could express. "Thank you. That helps." "There's something else," Isabella continued. "I've been thinking about Sophia's final years, how proud she was of what you were building. She left something for you that Marcus was instructed to deliver only after the company had been stabilized." She handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a worn leather journal, its pages filled with my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. "Her private thoughts about the business, about the family, about you," Isabella explained. "She wanted you to understand not just what she'd built, but why she'd built it, and why she trusted you to carry it forward." That evening in my apartment, I read through every page of Grandmama Sophia's journal. Her thoughts on leadership, her struggles with my father's gradual drift from their founding principles, her quiet observations about my childhood determination to uncover truth even when it was inconvenient. But it was the final entry, dated just days before her death, that brought tears to my eyes. "Elena has exceeded even my highest expectations. The foundation is already funding journalism in 12 countries. The company's reputation for integrity has never been stronger. She's not just preserving what I built, she's expanding it in ways I never imagined possible. I can rest now, knowing the Martinez legacy is in hands that will honor not just our name, but our values. She was always the one. I just had to wait for everyone else to see it too." 1 year later, the Polk Award ceremony at Columbia University felt like coming full circle. I stood at the podium where I'd once been a struggling graduate student, now accepting an award not for my own reporting, but for the Martinez Foundation's funding of investigative journalism worldwide. The stories we've supported this year have exposed corruption in 6 countries, protected hundreds of whistleblowers, and given voice to communities that powerful interests wanted silenced, I told the audience of journalists, academics, and media executives. This work is only possible because we've proven that ethical journalism isn't just morally right, it's economically sustainable. In the audience, I spotted several familiar faces. Sarah Martinez-Chin, now president of Martinez Media Group's digital division. James Rivera from the foundation. Marcus Chun, still serving as my trusted advisor. And in the back row, surprisingly, Victoria. After the ceremony, she approached me in the reception area. She looked different, less polished, more genuine than I'd seen her in years. "Congratulations," she said simply. "The foundation's work is impressive." "Thank you." I studied her face, looking for signs of the hostility that had defined our interactions for so long. Instead, I saw something that might have been regret. "I've been doing marketing for small nonprofits in Mexico City," she continued. It's nothing like what I had before, but it's honest work.
No kerapshin, no manipulashchin.
Just helping organizations tell their stories authentically. That sounds fulfilling. It is, surprisingly. She paused, seeming to gather courage. Elena, I owe you an apology. Not just for how I treated you after Abuela's announcement, but for how I treated you our entire lives. I let Papa's favoritism turn me into someone I'm not proud of. The apology I never expected to hear hung between us. We were both children trying to earn love in a dysfunctional system. I don't blame you for succeeding at it, but I do blame myself for not recognizing that you'd found a better path. She looked around the room filled with journalists and activists. This is what integrity looks like, isn't it? Building something that matters rather than just something that profits. There's room for both, I said gently. Sustainable businesses can be ethical businesses. You could contribute to this if you wanted to. For a moment, I saw a flash of the sister I'd occasionally glimpsed in childhood, before competition and parental manipulation had driven us apart. Maybe someday, she said softly, when I've figured out who I am without Papa's approval defining me. As she walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The family I'd been born into might never be healed, but the family I'd chosen, colleagues, friends, mentors, had given me something more valuable than blood relations, respect earned through integrity. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my office at Vista del Sol, which I'd converted into the Foundation's retreat center. Young journalists from around the world came here for intensive training in investigative techniques, safety protocols, and ethical reporting standards. I was reviewing applications for our new program supporting journalism in authoritarian countries when Miguel appeared in the doorway, now in his 70s, but still managing the estate with quiet efficiency. Señorita Elena, there's a delivery for you, he said, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been mischief. In the foyer waited a young woman about my age, holding a large wrapped canvas. Ms. Martinez? I'm Clara Santos from the San Francisco Chronicle Art Department. We commissioned something special for your 10th anniversary with the paper. She unwrapped the canvas to reveal a stunning portrait of Grandmama Sofia, painted from a photograph taken in her prime when she was building La Voz del Pueblo. But it wasn't just her image that took my breath away, it was the inscription at the bottom. Sofia Martinez, 1942 to 2024. She built more than a business. She built a legacy of truth. The entire Chronicle staff contributed to commission this, Clara explained. Everyone wanted to honor not just your grandmother, but the standard she set that you've continued. That afternoon, I hung the portrait in the Foundation's main conference room, where young journalists would see it every day as they prepared to take on the world's most challenging stories. As I stepped back to admire it, my phone rang with a call from Marcus. Elena, I have interesting news, he said. Victoria has applied for a grant from the Foundation. She wants to fund an investigation into media consolidation's impact on democracy in Latin America. I smiled, thinking of my sister's journey from corporate manipulation to authentic advocacy. What does her proposal look like? Thorough, well-researched, and aligned with everything your grandmother stood for. She's learned to channel her ambition into meaningful work. Approve it, I decided without hesitation. And see if she wants to present her findings at our annual conference. As I ended the call, I found myself looking up at Grandmama Sofia's portrait, imagining I could see approval in her painted eyes. The Martinez legacy hadn't been preserved exactly as it was. It had been transformed into something better, something more sustainable, something that honored not just our name, but our values. Outside the window, the vineyard stretched toward the hills where the sun was beginning to set. In a few hours, I'd join the current cohort of Foundation Fellows for dinner, listening to their stories of courage and determination in the face of powerful opposition. Tomorrow, I'd review grant applications from journalists in 12 countries who were using our funding to expose corruption and protect democracy. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I first arrived at Vista del Sol for that fateful family meeting 5 years ago. It was better. It was a life where being overlooked had prepared me to see clearly, where being underestimated had taught me to work harder, where being dismissed had shown me the value of proving worth through actions rather than words. I was no longer the invisible daughter in a family that saw only one star. I had become something better, a guardian of truth, a champion of integrity, and the keeper of a legacy that would outlast any of us. The Martinez name would continue, not through birthright or favoritism, but through the work we funded, the journalists we trained, and the stories that would never be silenced as long as someone remained brave enough to tell them. As twilight settled over the vineyard, I smiled at the portrait of my grandmother and whispered the words I never had the chance to say in person. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for showing me that the best legacy isn't what we inherit, but what we choose to build. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the California sky, bright points of light in the gathering darkness, just like the truth-tellers whose work would continue long after all of us were gone.